For years, you were the safe harbor. People packed their chaos on you, and you took pride in how much you could absorb. But lately, the harbor has caught fire. You are angry. You are sharp. You are difficult. And people are telling you that you've lost your way, that you've changed. I'm here to tell you that you haven't lost your way. You've found your borders. But there is a danger here. If you stay in the fire of reactive anger, you will burn down the very life you're trying to build. Welcome today. I'm not just talking about boundaries. I'm talking about a transition from the protesting victim to a sovereign queen. And we're going to talk about how your anger is a necessary signal, but can be a terrible master. Welcome to Emotional Healing for Christian Women, the podcast where faith meets inner healing. Imagine waking up without the weight of shame, guilt, fear, and loneliness. Imagine finally feeling worthy, confident, and at peace. And doing this with God by your side. That's the healing we can begin together. I'm Marvel Adeyemi, a psychotherapist and a faith-led women's coach. Let's get started. So the concept of anger as a primitive alarm system has been from ages. When you first start setting boundaries, your anger is like a watchman who has been asleep on the job for years. I'm talking about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Suddenly, he wakes up, sees the invaders already in the kitchen, and starts screaming. This isn't toxic anger. This is protective rage. You are not yelling at your partner because they forgot the milk. You're yelling because for 10 years, for 5 years, for 15 years, you felt like your needs didn't exist. So the anger is the payback for every time you stayed silent. You have to stop shaming the anger. If you didn't have that anger, you wouldn't have the fuel to change. But, and this is very important, the watchman's job is to alert you, not to run your country. If you let that yelling watchman, which is the anger, stay in charge, you stay in a state of high conflict, survival mode, and you're actually still reacting to your husband. So let's move from everyone is an invader to I choose the guests that I let into my space. When you are healing from self-abandonment, you often build a wall with no gate. You become rigid. You say, no one gets in. But a sovereign queen doesn't live behind a wall. She lives in a palace with different levels of access. So let's discuss the different levels of access. The outer court, people you are polite to, but who don't know your heart. Then the inner court, that's where your trusted allies are. Then the outer court, the Holy of Holies, just you and your God. The anger comes when we realize we've let outer court people into the Holy of Holies. The reactive anger phase is you trying to kick them out. The sovereign phase is you realizing that you are the one that holds the keys. You don't need to yell at them to leave. You simply stop inviting them. Now, this anger can feel like a performance of power. Many of you feel you must be angry for your boundary to be real. You think if you're not intense, they won't listen to you. I call that survival tax. You're paying with your nervous system because you're constantly in survival mode. And your nervous system's health is going to buy their compliance. Now, a boundary that requires a performance is a plea, a cry for help. A boundary that is stated in a whisper is a decree. The moment you realize you don't need your husband or friends or family to agree with your boundary, that is the moment the anger evaporates. You see, anger is the energy used to try and force someone to understand you, but sovereignty is the realization that your understanding is not required for your safety. In a high conflict or stuck marriages, women often spend a massive amount of emotional currency trying to get their partners to see, to hear, or value them. So let's say you stop spending about $500 worth of energy every week on secular arguments and mind reading. Where does that energy go? Now, there's going to be a shift because you redirect the saved energy into a literal or metaphoric fund that represents the profit of your peace. So for many women in long-term marriages, it could be a fund you're setting aside for your business, for your career. It's the ability to move yourself, to have the autonomy and flexibility to move your children, to move your business, to move yourself, to do things you'd love to do, explore, travel, pamper yourself without asking for permission or help. The moment you realize you don't need your husband to agree with your boundary is the moment the anger evaporates. Anger is the energy used to try and force someone to understand you. Sovereignty is the realization that that person's understanding is not required for your safety. Now, let's move on. Turning fight energy into building energy. If you spend 2 hours a day arguing about your boundaries and why it's important and why it matters, you have just given that person 2 hours of your life force. So take that fight energy, put it into something else. Put it into an interest, a hobby. Put it into your career, your business, your health, your beauty, your fitness, and let that be like a garden, metaphorically, that you're tending. You stop trying to fix the relationship dynamic and you start building a world so beautiful that you're no longer dependent on your husband's approval or whoever it is. It could be your parent or anyone. When you have your own kingdom, financially, spiritually, and emotionally, the anger disappears because they no longer have the power to ruin your day. They only have the power to be excluded from your peace. If you are in the angry phase, don't apologize for it. It's the fire that is forging your new sword. Now, but don't live in the forge. The goal of boundaries is not to win the war, is to end it. And real power is quiet. Real authority doesn't need to raise its voice. And so today ask yourself, am I using my energy to try and change my husband's mind or a friend's mind or my parents' mind? Or am I using my energy to build my life? I believe the other one, the latter part, is where your peace is. Now, where you want to be is the middle ground. Real healing happens when someone no longer needs to disappear or dominate. The middle ground is emotional adulthood. Your ability to say, I am important and so do you, without collapsing, without controlling, without resentment, leaking everywhere. And this is important. Boundaries are not revenge for years that you didn't have them. They are actually an act of respecting yourself. And self-respect is usually quieter than people expect. So what does healthy boundary actually look like? Healthy boundaries are usually calm. They are clear, consistent, direct, and they don't depend on emotional intensity. A healthy boundary does not need you to perform. It doesn't need dramatic energy, screaming, yelling. It doesn't need to convince people. This is where I end, and this is where you begin. This is what my responsibilities are. And this is what my rights are. Same thing for you. And honestly, that kind of steadiness takes practice, especially for people who have spent years emotionally fused with others, people who overfunction, often monitor everybody else. They monitor everybody else's moods, reactions, disappointment, approval. So boundary can initially feel terrifying because boundaries will risk rejection, conflict, abandonment, or disapproval, which is why many formerly boundaryless people become anxious after setting even healthy limits. Their nervous system says danger, even when they are finally protecting themselves. So in closing, what I would like you to reflect on is, if you're listening today and you recognize yourself in this conversation that I'm having, I want you to know something. You're not failing because your boundaries still feel messy. Many people move through stages. Sometimes it looks like number 1, no boundaries. Number 2, then resentment kicks in. And number 3, there is anger. Number 4, there is that rigid boundaries. Number 5, then you have emotional clarity. And number 6, there is that stable self-respect. So the goal is not about you being perfect. All right? The goal is awareness. And eventually you'll find your steady ground balance. So instead of asking, am I overreacting? Maybe you should ask, am I learning how to stop abandoning myself without abandoning others? And this is a far more important and powerful question. All right, this is where I'll end today. Thank you for joining me. If today's podcast has touched you, like it, leave a comment, share with some other people. And if today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone who may need it. And as always, stay beautiful, stay confident, and stay prayed up. Thank you for spending time with me today on Emotional Healing for Christian Women. If this episode blessed you, please leave a review and share it with a friend who needs encouragement. And don't forget to download my new book, Beyond the Hurt, from my website, marvelademi.com.au, and other free resources. Until next time, stay healed, stay beautiful, and stay confident.